Hi class, in lesson 3.4 we will be focusing on benchmark fractions. Learning targets for today: we will estimate fractions by using benchmark fractions, we will order fractions in ascending order, and we will compare fractions. Key terms to look for in lesson 3.4 are benchmark fractions and inequality. Let's take a look at problem 1 on page 142. We are going to be using our fraction strips from the previous lesson, so make sure that you have those out. To get started today, we are going to label each number line to represent the fractional part provided, and then we are going to plot each fraction. One thing I want to point out with the crew member on the left is, as you get ready to label each number line, think about how you folded your strips in the last lesson, and this will help you get the number line spaced out evenly and then help you plot your fractions. So go ahead and do number 1 through 4 with your group members. Here is what your number lines should look like along with the fractions plotted. Let's take a look at number 1 first, and we had to do fourths, so we have 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, and you will notice that 1/4 and 3/4 are plotted because that's what we had to do for letter A and B. Moving on to number 2 for twelfths, we have 1/12 all the way through 12/12, and we have 1/12 plotted here, we have 5/12 plotted, 7/12, and 11/12. For sixteenths, we have the number line broken up into equal size sixteenths. We have 1/16 labeled, we have 7/16 labeled, we have 10/16 labeled, and we have 15/16 labeled. And finally for eighths, we have 1/8 labeled, 3/8 labeled, 5/8 labeled, and 7/8 labeled. So again, when you are plotting the fractions on a number line, just a dot right above the fraction on the number line will do. Let's take a look at problem 2 on page 143 and talk about benchmark fractions. Benchmark fractions are common fractions you can use to estimate the value of fractions. 3 common benchmark fractions that we are going to be talking about are 0, 1/2, and 1. A fraction is close to 0 when the numerator is very small compared to the denominator. A fraction is close to 1/2 when the numerator is about half the size of the denominator, and a fraction is close to 1/2 when the numerator is very close in size to the denominator. Number 1 tells us to use each number line that we completed in problem 1 to write a fraction that is, and then if we take a look at the different statements for letters A through G. So go ahead and do A through G for number 1 with your group members. For letter A, fractions that are less than 1/2 would be 1/4, 3/8, 3/12, or 3/16. For letter B, exactly 1/2, 2/4, 4/8, 6/12, 8/16. For letter C, greater than but not equal to 1/2. You could have 3/4, 5/8, 7/12, or 9/16. For letter D, close to but not equal to 0, 1/4, 1/8, 1/12, or 1/16. Letter E, exactly 1/2, 4/4, 8/8, 12/12, 16/16. For letter F, close to but not equal to 1, you could have 3/4, 7/8, 11/12, 15/16. And for letter G, exactly 0, that would be 0/4, 0/8, 0/12, and 0/16. Number 2 down at the bottom of page 143 tells us to name the closest benchmark fraction for each fraction that is given. So go ahead and do letters A through L with your group members. For letter A, 4/9 would be closest to 1/2, B, 8/9 closest to 1, C, 6/100 closest to 0, D, 5/67 closest to 0, E, 7/15 would be closest to 1/2, F, 7/12 also closest to 1/2, 5/6 for letter G closest to 1, for letter H, 14/27 closest to 1/2, 12/13 for letter I closest to 1, letter J, 1/17 closest to 0, K, 5/11 closest to 1/2, and for letter L, 3/7 closest to 1/2. At the top of page 144, number 3 tells us to write the unknown numerator or denominator so that each fraction is as close to but less than 1/2. So go ahead and do letters A through F with your group members. Remember, you want to try to get as close as you can get. So keep that in mind when you are filling in either the numerator or the denominator, as close to but less than 1/2. For letter A, we should have 5/12, B 13/27, C 8/17, letter D 7/15, E 6/13, and letter F 9/19. All of those fractions are going to get you as close to but less than 1/2. Very similar in number 4, we are going to write the unknown numerator or denominator, so now each fraction is as close to but less than 1. So again, letters A through F with your group members, try to get as close to but less than 1 with adding your numerator or your denominator. For letter A, we should have 16/17, letter B 11/12, letter C 7/8, letter D 17/18, letter E 13/14, and letter F 9/10. Number 5 at the bottom of the page is telling us to rewrite each expression using benchmark fractions. We want to then estimate the sum and finally explain our reasoning. Remember, our crew member over here is telling us and reminding us that to estimate is meaning to give an educated guess. So do letters A, B, and C with your group members. If we take a look at letter A, we are going to rewrite the expression 1 plus 1. I know that both fractions are close to 1, so that when you estimate the sum, it is close to but less than 2. For letter B, the first fraction is going to be close to 0, 1/11. Second fraction is close to 1/2. So when you would estimate the sum, it is going to be close to 1/2. And finally, for letter C, all the fractions in the expression are pretty much close to 1 whole. So when you estimate the sum, it is going to be close to but just a little less than 5. Let's skip over to problem 3 on page 146 and talk about inequalities. You can use the inequality symbols less than or greater than to write a mathematical sentence that compares two numbers. An inequality is a statement that one number is less than or greater than another number. Number 1 tells us to compare each pair of fractions using benchmark fractions. Insert a greater than or less than symbol to make the inequality true, and then finally explain your reasoning. So go ahead and get started by answering letter A through D with your group members. If we take a look at letter A, we know that 11/12 is close to 1, 5/9 is close to 1/2, so 11/12 is going to be greater than 5/9. For letter B, 5/7 is close to 1, 5/9 is close to 1/2, so therefore I know that 5/9 is going to be less than 5/7. 7/13 is closer to 1 than 5/11, so therefore 7/13 is going to be greater than 5/11. And finally for letter D, 7/10 is close to 1, 5/10 is close to 1/2, so we should know then that 5/10 is less than 7/10. Number 2 down at the bottom of page 146 tells us to determine a fraction that keeps each list in ascending order. If we remember from the previous lesson, ascending order is going to mean that we are going from least to greatest. So make sure that you answer letters A through D for number 2. Answers are going to vary for number 2, but here are some that you could have had for A through D. For A, you could have had 4/7, letter B 3/8, letter C 4/8, letter D 2/5. Please let me know if you have any questions when you are checking over the fractions that you put in to make sure you know that they are correct. Number 3 at the top of page 147 tells us to list the fractions shown in ascending order. Go ahead and do letters A, B, and C with your group members. For letter A, we should have 1/11, 1/9, 1/8, 1/7, 1/5, and 1/4. You can see that as the fraction is getting larger, the denominator is getting smaller. Letter B, 4/12, 4/10, 4/7, 4/5. And finally for letter C, 3/11, 3/9, 3/8, 3/7, 3/5, and 3/4. Number 4 says, what do the fractions in each part of question 3 have in common, and explain how you determine the order of the fractions in each. So please discuss that and answer with your group members. Hopefully you notice that all of the fractions in each set do have the same numerator. When the numerators are all the same, all you have to do is put the denominators in order from least to greatest in order to put those fractions in ascending order. Number 5 at the bottom of page 147 tells us to write the fractions shown in ascending order. Use what you know about benchmark fractions to determine the order, and finally explain your reasoning. If we look at 2/7, we know that that's closest to 0. We know that 10/11 is pretty close to 1, so those are going to be the smallest and the largest fractions in the list. The hard part is determining which of the fractions is closer to 1/2, either 7/13 or 5/9. If we take a look at those two fractions closely, hopefully we are able to determine that slightly more than half of 9 parts of a whole is greater than slightly more than half of 13 parts of a whole. So if you look at that denominator, if it's greater, then it's probably going to be a smaller fraction. So if we look at the order then, ascending order, we should have 2/7, 7/13, 5/9, and 10/11. That is going to do it for lesson 3.4 on benchmark fractions. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks.